such a blessing to be here. Now, how did you follow that great patriotic speech? As a matter of fact, he stole a lot of what I talk about because I'm going to get down there so I don't have that podium between you and I. If you don't mind, let me just get down with you. But anyway, before I go anywhere else, I want to just continue along the flow of what was being spoken so eloquently here. Because you see, too many of us have forgotten our heritage. Too many of us have forgotten what the Church of Jesus Christ did for this country. Too many of us have forgotten that even those pilgrims that came to America and landed so close to here, came here for one reason, and that was to have the freedom to worship God. But even then, when they came here, they decided to try a communist experiment. And basically, here is all this land before us. Let us all work it together. And let us share in what the land produces. Sounds so romantic, doesn't it? Yeah. It was a total failure. They almost starved to death. But they were smart enough and flexible enough that they realized that didn't work. And so they said, well, the Governor Bradford, well, look, this didn't work. So Governor Bradford said, all right, each of you take your own plot of land. You work the land, you feed your family, and the free enterprise system was born in America very early on. Now my question to you is, if it was tried 400 years ago and it didn't work, why would we be dumb enough to try it again? George Santillana once said, if we do not learn the lessons of history, we are bound to repeat them. But anyway, that is our heritage. This country was founded as a Christian country. Amen. And how dare our president say it is not a Christian country? But you know, I want to just continue what was so eloquently said a minute ago. I love the Constitution of the United States. I love the Declaration of Independence. I believe that those two documents are the two greatest documents that have ever been written in history outside of the Bible.
Hallelujah.
And I believe that the reason they have lasted over 2 centuries is because they were written on the knees of the framers.
Praise the Lord.
As a matter of fact, and I'm going to paraphrase, but you know the two framers that the liberal media always talks about. They are so-called ungodly framers. You know who they are. Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin. Well, at the Constitutional Convention, it was Benjamin Franklin that basically, and I'm going to paraphrase, but he said, if a sparrow cannot fall to the ground without divine providence, how do you think that you guys can go generate this document without seeking revelation from above? And he called for a prayer meeting. He called for a prayer meeting. But as a matter of fact, the thing that is interesting is they had a big squabble because all 13 colonies were 13 different denominations, and they couldn't agree on who was going to chair that prayer meeting. So they finally decided they all would get on their knees and pray. And this Constitution was bathed in prayer. And if we go back to the Declaration, you know, in the Declaration we have a series of grievances against King George. Each and every one of those grievances were preached from the pulpits of America before they were written on the Declaration. As a matter of fact, my friend David Barton says, you could consider the Declaration a series of sermon summaries. Now, if we look at the other ungodly framer, it was Thomas Jefferson. Declaration of Independence. And as a matter of fact, our friend was talking about Paul Revere. Do you realize where Paul Revere was going when he was making his famous ride? He was going to the home of a pastor by the name of Jonas Clark. And those two patriots that were mentioned, John Hancock and Samuel Adams, were at the home of Jonas Clark. And they were feared by the British Army. All three of them. As a matter of fact, the very first battle for our independence was the Battle of Lexington. You know who led the Battle of Lexington? Pastor Jonas Clark. You know who were his troops? The men from his congregation. Now, you know, it was very interesting because these were men of honor. These were men of God. And here's something that we, you know, the majority of us wouldn't think of these, but they said, Pastor Jonas Clark said, you know, we can't shoot the first gun. We cannot start the war. And here we're in British country. And they waited until the British fired, and 19 men fell dead. Now, biblically, they could fire back, and they did. But that was our first battle. It was pastors. It was pastors that were at the forefront. The Great Awakening is very intertwined with the American Revolution. And that's the birth of our nation. My question is, where are those pastors today? They're hiding behind their pulpits. They're hiding behind their 501c3s, scared to death, concerned about being politically correct. You know, I talk to pastors all over the country. In the last 12 months, I've done 24 pastors' conferences all over the country. And let me share with you why I am doing this. About a year ago, I was at a pastor's conference, and I heard a statistic that really broke my heart. The statistic said that in the United States there were approximately 65 million evangelical Christians, and that of those, only 50% are registered to vote, and that of the 50% that are registered to vote, only 50% voted in the last election. That means 3 out of 4 evangelical Christians stayed at home. That's 48 million evangelical Christians. Now, I've talked to a couple of bishops of the Catholic Church. They tell me the figures are the same in the Catholic Church. I just don't have the numbers, so I can't quote it. I'd love for somebody to get me the numbers so I could quote it, but I don't have it. But both of these bishops told me the numbers are the same. We ought to be ashamed. But you know, there's a series of excuses that I get. The first one is separation of church and state. I'll tell you, I know the Constitution very well. I know the Declaration very well. Separation of church and state is not in either one of them.
That's right. That's right.
But not only that, separation of church and state that statement came as a result of a concern of all 13 of the colonies. As this new constitutional representative republic was being started, all 13 colonies were concerned that this new government would not impose upon them what they had fled England to get away from, and that was a state religion. All 13 colonies had the same concern. It was expressed by the Danbury Baptists. And so Thomas Jefferson writes a letter to the Danbury Baptists. And I want us to analyze this letter very clearly. He says, in matters of faith and religion, no one has the right to interfere. Those matters are only between you and God.
That's right.
Very clear statement. And then he cites the First Amendment of the Constitution. And he says, the legislature shall not make any laws for establishment of religion or preventing the free exercise thereof. And then he says, thus, or therefore, there is a wall of separation between church and state. If you look at those three statements in context, it is absolutely obvious that Thomas Jefferson was talking about a one-way wall. A one-way wall to keep government from establishing a state religion, to keep government from interfering with our free exercise of religion. Mm-hmm. In no way, shape, or form could you infer that that letter was implying that the church should not be involved or have an influence upon every area of society. And as a matter of fact, you know, the Bible says, occupy till I come. Occupy is a military term. You occupy a hill after you conquer the hill. And then you stand from a position of victory at the top of the hill. We ought to be having an influence in every area of society, whether it is arts and entertainment, whether it is sports, whether it is the media, or education, or business, or government. The other excuse that I get is, well, God just called me to preach the gospel. Mm-hmm. It sounds so pious. Mm-hmm. My answer always is the following. Tell me, what is the gospel? Because you see, the gospel is a lot more than John 3:16. As a matter of fact, the Apostle Paul in Acts chapter 20 says, I tell you this day that my hands are free from the blood of all men, because I have not shunned to declare the whole counsel of God. Paul was referring to Ezekiel 3:18 and 19, which says in Ezekiel 3:18, if you do not warn the wicked of his wicked ways, he will die in his iniquity, but his blood will I require of your hands. Pretty heavy. 3:19, but if you warn the wicked of his wicked ways, and he does not turn, he still will die in his iniquity, but you have redeemed your soul. It is our responsibility to warn the wicked. Now, Jesus said, you're the light of the world. But you know what we do? We go to our churches with our little flashlight and we point the light on one another. Oh boy, do we love to criticize one another and to gossip about one another. Have you ever heard of pious gossip? That's when somebody comes to you and says, listen, we need to pray about Susie, because let me tell you what Susie is doing. I call that pious gossip. Anyway, the Bible tells you that light is worthless until you point it to darkness. As a matter of fact, in John chapter 3, it says that darkness hates the light because it exposes their evil deeds. So light is worthless until we point it to darkness, and that's out there in the marketplace. Let's stop playing church inside the four walls of a church. Jesus also said, you're the salt of the earth. Salt is a preserver. But for salt to preserve anything, you have to put it upon that which you want to preserve. It's about time that we fight to preserve the family. It's about time that we fight to preserve the sanctity of life. It's about time that we fight to preserve the future of our children and grandchildren.